Welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about walking. Now, walking again is a little bit more complex than standing, but it's going to be something that is it's how we transport ourselves around the world. We talk a lot about running, and that's fun, but in reality, ancestrally, people would have walked. If we need to get anywhere without a time constraint, we walked. If we need to go somewhere quick, we'd sprint. And so walking is it's a foundational, constitutional aspect of how we move. So a few tips for how we walk, and we're going to talk about basically the foundation. So the first thing to understand is that walking, all movement comes from the spine. It's something called the spinal engine theory. And so the ability to have access for your spine. So there's a, it's fancy, but there's a tensegrity structure, which is basically a relationship between your bones, your vertebrae, and the muscles and tendons around them that suspends your spine along this column. It's not just smashed on top of one another that you turn into a stiff rod. There's a rotational and a web-like structure that holds your body up. Now that spine moves as my shoulders and hips oscillate around it. So you can see my shoulders are moving and my hips are moving. This is exaggerated, but the goal of a walk is a natural saunter. You want something that looks a little bit more like I'm walking and I'm engaging and I'm allowing my body to flow and move. Now, the important part about that is that this is the introduction to running, which is the introduction to sprinting. And so everything stacks and scales on top of one another. So as I walk and I move, I want to start to create the motion where I'm pushing off my feet and I'm starting to extend the hips as I take each step. And now as I start to just speed up, it turns into a run, that turns into a sprint, depending on the pace I'm moving. So first thing you have to understand is if your spine is stiff, you're walking a little bit too. And one thing you'll notice is that people who walk with a stiff spine, they tend to overextend and they swing their arms. So if you notice that as you walk, you swing your arms and your limbs further, what that's doing is it's making up the leverage that you've lost at your spine. So a hyperextension of the hyperinterpretation of this is a real model walk, where you see the models that really turn the shoulders and really turn. It's exaggerated. But that's the point of models. Everything about them is exaggerated. They might be skinnier or taller or lankier or wearing the most exaggerated clothes, so they walk in the most exaggerated way. But what you also can see is good athletes. When they walk, they get this saunter, they're relaxed, shoulders are back, they're cruising, they're relaxed. Nothing's bothering them. And so for you want to think about walking like a supple leopard, like a black panther. You're just out here, you're cruising, you're moving. Like that's the kind of thing, because your mindset dictates how you move. And so what you can notice is your physiology expresses your psychology. And that's important. And nowhere is that more evident than your walk. Just start people watching and notice, oh, that's interesting. This guy's walking with a limp. Okay. Or this guy's back is really stiff. Or this person is just very preoccupied. They're upright in their shoulders and they're stiff in their spine. So you'll notice a bunch about people by how they walk and how they move. So the first thing to understand is if you want to walk well, you have to have access to your spine. So we'll work on some exercises later on in the series that unlock some of that spinal motion. But at first, just start to notice, okay, is my spine moving? Once you have that, the next thing is to start thinking about, I need to push with my feet actively. So the cue I like to think about here, there's a few different ones and we'll see which one tracks for you, is to roll over the foot. One thing you'll notice is that people often with their feet, they get in this bad habit where they'll step and they swing their foot out around the outside. So I'll do a few steps. They step and they bring their feet out to the outside. So in essence, as I step here, instead of pushing over and rolling off and picking my foot up here, I just kind of bring my foot out. And so you see how the ankle doesn't move. In essence, if I don't roll my foot over, if I don't step here and roll my foot over here to push off the toes and push into the next step, well, something has to get around. So I step and I bring my foot out to the outside. And so the first thing you want to think about is I'm pushing off the toes and rolling over. And so notice that I'm keeping my body, just like if I was running, I would step and pick my foot up. I would step and pick my foot up. The same cue for you is as I push, I'm pushing through the big toes and I'm creating space for the next step. So the felt experience is the tissue under your toes. So if you think about this, like the crease of your toes, you want to push off that. So every step, I'm pushing off the crease of my toes and pushing in the next step. It's more active. It's gonna get you, you're gonna cover distance because as I push and I step, I'll do a few steps going this way. As I push, you notice how I'm actually throwing myself in the next step. I'm stepping and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And what this does is it creates a very active foot integration for each step. Not only am I pushing myself forward, but I'm also creating space for the next step. And this is important too, because if you look at, let's say, as I step and I push off, I'm getting actual bend at the toes. And if you see this, this is important because people's toes get so stiff from wearing shoes all the time, they never actually bend. And so if all my toes are just bending like that and they never actually get a full extension, my feet are gonna feel like stiff flippers. And so the cue of rolling over the midfoot. So notice that the weight and the extension is to go over the midfoot with each step, or to push and feel the creases on the ground, or to actively push off each step. Those three are gonna get the same exact idea, which is I'm stepping and I'm pushing and I'm moving forward. I'm not swinging my leg around. I want to actively create the introduction to step, lift, and move. That's a big difference there. So that's the second cue. The third cue is to focus on where your eyesight is. Now, we'll talk about eyesight more in a future video, but for now, what I want you to notice is when you walk, what happens to your eyes? Does the horizon, or how happens to what you see? Does the horizon jiggle? If every step you're taking is da-da-da-da-da, you're putting too much force into each step and you're landing too hard. Now, that might mean you have to shorten your stride. A lot of times when people step too big and they slam their heels on the ground, they're like, boom, boom, boom. You don't want to be slamming the ground. You want to be walking softly. You want to feel and be. Walking softly is not like tiptoeing around. It's walking accurately. You're putting just enough force into the ground to be able to manifest the exact, you want to be enough. You don't want to be more than enough. You don't want to be too silent. You want to be just smooth. You want to walk and feel natural. So one way you can do that is watch your eyesight. If the horizon jiggles with each step, shorten your stride and absorb more feet, or more of that force with each step, and push off into each step. That'll make a big difference from your overall experience of the world. And because every single time you slam the ground, if my head is shaking, well, guess what? My heel, my knee, my hip, my spine, all that's absorbing force too. So watch with your eyesight. So keep those three things in mind. Move from the spine, roll over the foot, so push through the ground and pick up your feet, and then make sure that your eyes aren't jiggling. You want to have a natural, easy step. Those three will level up your walking and makes a big difference. And the best part is when you're walking barefoot, well, you get nothing that blocks the feedback, and it gets you a really good way to learn and to experience what it feels like to walk naturally. All right, we'll see you in the next video.